Hi, everyone, and welcome to our session today on how to combat imposter syndrome. I want to kick us off with a quick intro. My name is Masiel Torres, and I am the social media influencer and PR manager at L'Oreal in their active cosmetics division. I work for a French pharmacy brand called Vichy Laboratoire, but of course on the US side. As for my time at Rutgers, I graduated with a degree in journalism and media studies and a minor in Latino and Caribbean studies and Spanish in 2007. I'm sorry, 2017. So, for the sake of time, let's jump right in. And I want to thank Marina Lopez and the Rutgers Alumni Association for reaching out to me for this opportunity to share, my tips and tricks with you all. So really quickly, let's talk about like what is imposter syndrome because it's something we hear all the time. And a quick Google search will define it as an internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be. While this definition usually narrowly applies to intelligence and achievement, it has links to perfectionism and social context. So there's obviously a lot to unpack there. um, First off, one thing I want to point out is that it's an internal experience, and what that translates to me is that it's in my own head. And it also has links to perfectionism, which I'll get to a bit later. So, some common signs of imposter syndrome include the inability to realistically assess your competence and skills, attributing your success to external factors, berating your own performance, the fear that you won't live up to expectations, overachieving, self doubt, setting very challenging goals for yourself, and feeling disappointed when you fall short. So, for me, of those common signs, what really resonates with me is one, the inability to realistically assess my competence and skills and attributing my success to external factors. And of course, self doubt, which, we kind of all deal with at one point or the other. So a little bit more background on myself. My whole career, and I say whole, I've only been out of school for 5 years, but was in traditional media, so TV, print, but more of a news focus, political news, personal finance, and global news. But I think after 2020, where one, we had a lot of time to reflect on our lives and what we wanted to do when the world kind of shut off and we had time to think. And, between the political climate and the pandemic, I was really just a little burnt out. And I had been wanting to make a switch from news to beauty, but that's not the easiest thing to do because those industries are obviously not similar at all. So eventually, I found a company that was actually willing to take a chance on me to do social, which is what I was doing before, but obviously working for brands. So I did that for about 8 months. Then after applying God knows how many times to L'Oreal, I ended up getting a role there and, it all worked out. But I think that this role has really kind of brought that imposter syndrome back to the surface for me. Um, because, as I mentioned in my current role, I manage social, PR, and influencer activations. However, I only really had the social experience. So what that means is that, I was very comfortable in social media. Like I know the platforms, I know the trends, I know the analytics. It's what I had been doing for a long time. But the PR and the influencer aspect of this role was just not something I was comfortable with at all. Um, so that leads me to again imposter syndrome. And the reason I tell you this is I'd literally joke to my friends and my fiance and say, did they even read my resume? Like, I don't know how to do this stuff. I'm not qualified for this. I applied because I knew how to do some of that, but like the fact that I actually got it was a little scary, for lack of better terms. So yeah, I just definitely felt super uncomfortable, doubted everything, and it's been, I honestly didn't see my own potential. Um, so back to the point on perfectionism, it's a major cause. and like a personality trait that I know I have, and it calls of imposter syndrome. Growing up, I always did fairly well in school. I enjoyed school. I enjoyed learning, but it also came with this relationship of I have to maintain that. You become the good student, and then you stay as the good student. So there's that. So I put a lot of pressure on myself to maintain that kind of idea and perception of myself. Um, and I still struggle with that to this day. So I guess the point that I want to bring up is, you know, this is something that one I still struggle with, and I want to share with you guys ways that I've been working actively on it because it never really ends. The work is constant, especially when you have a kind of personality that you want to do things well, you want to always present yourself in the best light. So how I'm actively still working on it for me, step number one is reflection. So as I mentioned, 2020 was a year of a lot of reflection for myself, whether that's like, what am I doing with my life? Is this really what I want to do? Is this the life I had envisioned for myself? And when I realized that the answer was no, I wanted to, you know, find a way to fix that. So reflection, imposter syndrome likes to appear when you're in a transition period. So for me, I really had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that is not a fun place to be, but it's necessary because you're never, the more you challenge yourself, the more you go after new things, like you're going to be uncomfortable because you're never going to know everything. And if you're in the right room, you're going to be the person with the least amount of knowledge. So you always want to be in a position of being somewhere where you're going to grow and learn from other people. So again, I had to really get comfortable being uncomfortable, and it's not a fun process. And the first step for me was realizing it's okay not to know everything, not to, come in and just like know it all, know how to do it. They did read my resume, they know what I can do, and then they believed in me for that next portion. Um, and another part of that is just like really being okay with asking questions. And that's why kind of my number two is ask for feedback. Every role I've ever been in, I knew this was something I should be doing, like asking your manager, like, how was that? How am I doing? Just to, get a pulse on how people are feeling. But for me, I hated asking for feedback because I thought that they were going to tell me what I thought about myself, which was, oh, you're not doing too great in this area. And it's never been that case. Like, I've always gotten great feedback, but I didn't want someone to validate what I was already feeling and how I felt like I didn't belong and that I didn't know what I was doing. So yeah, I'm always so surprised when I got that great feedback because it's never what I felt. So yeah, I think in a lot of ways, again, you put that pressure on yourself. So number one, again, it's reflection. Number two, ask for that feedback because you'll find that it really is sometimes a lot in your head and you are doing fine and people are seeing the great work you're doing and it's usually you. Number three, separate your feelings from the fact. This goes more to the feeling, like no matter how much you feel that you are not doing well, you probably are. And regardless of how much you don't feel like you belong, you were chosen for a reason. Like you were given the job for a reason. You clearly had the background, you clearly have the skills. They clearly see something in you that maybe you don't see in yourself, but those are the facts. You were hired with your resume for a reason, or whatever space you're in, whether it's a job or a different space, but you've earned that spot, and that took hard work and dedication. And it wasn't luck, it wasn't chance, it wasn't fate, it was your hard work. Um, and then for my next point, there's this saying that everyone loves. It's like, fake it till you make it, right? And I have a lot of issues with that phrase because I used to subscribe to the same idea. And, sometimes I still say it casually in conversation, but I don't think that's the right approach. I think that, it's more face it till you make it. And I heard this from a different speaker once. And the point of that is like, one, accepting that it's okay not to know something. Two, is that like, if you fake it, you're kind of validating that you don't belong. You're saying like, I know I shouldn't be here, so I'm going to fake it. No, you should be there. You've earned that spot. And it's okay not to know everything. So face it. Like, you know, go and ask those questions. Go and take those extra courses that you may need. You know, do whatever it is that you need to do to feel comfortable in that space. So, just, for me, it's really been hard. Not hard, but it's been a challenge in a new role that there's things I'm not 100% confident in. But again, you really just need to sit down and say it's okay that I don't know this. They're not expecting me to know everything in month one. And I have thankfully heard a lot of positive feedback from my manager, our divisional president, who I just presented to yesterday. And, you know, I'm facing it. I know there's things I don't know, and I'm not scared anymore to ask the questions, to, reach out to my coworkers, and other people in my position and say, like, what would you do? Do you know what this means? Like, and sometimes it's being blatantly honest and telling your manager, like, I don't know what that means at all. Like, I don't know how to start. I don't know. Can you please walk me through? Because that is just what is expected in your first few months in a new role. So the next, thing that I would suggest is highlighting the positives. So this kind of, I would say, like the second part in reflecting and taking a moment to realize, who you are, why you're there, what is your why, and like I said before, you've worked to get to where you are. So it's, sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm so lucky to be where I am. And, to a point, yes, I do feel lucky. But again, I have worked for it, coming from, I was a first generation college student. Um, you know, my parents maybe made it to the eighth grade in their countries, came here, started a new life. So seeing from what they gave up and sacrificed to where I am now, I do feel lucky because I had that opportunity, but it wasn't luck that got me here. It was my hard work, my perseverance, and, me really taking this opportunity and this chance that my parents gave me and making it worth it for them and for myself. Um, so yeah, it takes a lot of, again, reflection to say, I should be here. I'm sitting at this table because I bring something to this table. I have insights, I have information that people want to hear. And even for this webinar, I was like, oh, like, why would they want me to speak? It's a constant struggle, and it's something that you will have to practice at all the time. And back to that point about being a perfectionist, you know, sometimes people say it in a negative way, but there are some positives of wanting to do things right. It's, you really care about the quality of your work. You care about, striving for excellence, but you just don't want to get to the point that, you know, any mistake is going to throw you off the bandwagon. It's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to feel uncomfortable. So, if anyone wants to ask any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Just to summarize really quickly again, I think my top 5 tips for kind of battling imposter syndrome, again, for me, step 1 was reflection. Step 2 was asking for feedback. Step 3 is separating your feelings from the facts. Step 4 was face it till you make it, not fake it till you make it. And 5 is just highlighting the positives. And again, that goes back to reflection. So if there's any questions, please let me know. Okay, I see one on the screen now. Will you be covering situations when other people consider you to be an imposter? How to overcome their prejudice about you? What to do if you don't get good feedback? Or if you, I think I'm missing that. Oh, think the feedback is unfair and biased. Yeah, if we could just go back to the main part. Okay. Yes, Carol, I can definitely talk about that. I think this is a little tricky because I'm very much of the opinion of, at least in a workplace, like, my job is to do my job. What other people think of me is none of my business. However, obviously, if it's a manager, then that's a little bit of a trickier situation because they do have some kind of control over, your career, your pay, promotions, XYZ. But again, I would assume that if your manager hired you, then they do believe that you have the skills to be there. And for some reason, whether it's your skills, your background, your knowledge, they brought you onto the team. So, like I said, I'm of the opinion that I go to work. My coworkers, like, yes, you work with them, you want it to be a collaborative and happy and non toxic environment, but as long as you are confident in what you bring to the table, even if you don't feel it all the way, again, face it till you make it, work on the things you need to improve because, those opinions, they may have a point. Like, she's not super knowledgeable in XYZ. And that's fair. But clearly, I'm here for a reason. I was hired to be here and I'll work on the things I need to work on, but you worry about your space and I'll worry about mine. And that's just the very, straightforward way I think about it. How to overcome their prejudice about you. Thankfully, I've always worked on really good teams. And I feel like a lot of times if someone thinks something of you, they're not going to just tell you, you may like sense it in one way or the other. But again, it's up to you to work on those things that you think you need to work on, but also realizing that you're there for a reason. So I know prejudice is about me. That even in this role, I definitely felt that I wonder if my coworkers think that like, oh, she's so young. What is she doing in this role? Like, I replaced someone who had a senior title, and I'm basically doing all the same work, which is definitely scary. But one way I actually did help overcome, like for me internally, my perceived beliefs that they may have some prejudice against me is that I had a presentation yesterday for my 2022 brand strategy. And I made sure, again, a bit of the perfectionist part of me, I woke up at 6 a.m. for 2 days, ran through it so that by the time I spoke about what I know, this is my job. I know what I'm saying and I know why I'm making these recommendations for the brand. But I wanted it to convey it with confidence so that when my coworkers for the first time saw me present, they're like, wow, she really knows what she's talking about. Because again, I may feel that, but if I presented it in a way that wasn't authentic or didn't flow, I was afraid that they were going to think that, oh, like, what is she doing? So again, part of it's preparation, prepare when you do have these chances to show people what you can do, prepare for them. And that way, when you speak confidently, you speak eloquently, and if you know what you're doing, that'll show in your presentations. So the next part of this question, what to do if you don't get good feedback or if you think the feedback is unfair and biased. Um, I have had this happen before where I got feedback and I was like, oh, like I can't believe that they would say that I didn't do XYZ, like I'm really trying. And again, this is one thing that is really hard, especially if you feel like an imposter, is to talk about yourself. So a lot of the great advice I've been given throughout my career is, toot your own horn, talk about the things that you have accomplished, and it's not bragging. Like, for me culturally, like we don't talk about ourselves very much. Like it almost feels like you're bragging or sound like a know-it-all or whatever it may be. But in the workplace, you know, send out a roundup email of the results you've achieved. And of course, every industry is different. But for me, hey guys, we just won this award based on the submission that I did. Hey guys, like our Instagram numbers are up. Hey guys, this influencer activation that I created just got us, I don't know, expanded our reach by X%. It's okay to do those things. And I think you need to, one, for yourself to keep track for when it is those seasons of, oh, it's year end reviews, like what have you done this year? And that way, if you get feedback that you're not aligned with, you can say, hear you, thank you for the feedback. However, I do want to bring to attention XYZ that I did accomplish this year and why I think that maybe there has been some miscommunication, but I wouldn't let it get to that point. I would actively and consistently talk about what you've achieved. That way, when those times do come to get feedback or when you ask for feedback, there's not, everyone is on the same page. Like they know what you've done. So I hope that answers that question. From Jennifer, thank you for these tips. Any advice on how to develop more confidence presenting? I find that something will be clear in my mind, but once I have to present it, I get really nervous and come out clearly. So thank you, Jennifer, for that question. And honestly, I feel the exact same way. Even right now, I'm like super nervous, and hopefully, that's not what I'm presenting. But for me, I think that just doing it more, like, you know, I could have gotten reached out to say like, no, I'm busy, I don't have time. But I know I'm a little, shy to present, so I try to push myself to do it as often as I can. So that's one part, get those reps in, like just present every chance you get, even if it's a more informal setting like it is right now. Um, and this isn't the best approach, but if I'm presenting something and I have my like PowerPoint, whatever it is, I'll literally write everything down. However, I wouldn't try to memorize it because then you're going to try to say the things you memorize versus having bullet points and speaking authentically. So I think that the biggest thing about presenting is that think of it as a conversation, although it's like not really two way. It should flow, it should feel natural. Don't feel like you have to say everything verbatim that you prepared, but maybe just outline bullet points that say, I want to talk about, like, for example, even for this presentation, I have my 5 key pieces of advice, and I have some examples that I wanted to highlight. But if I look over and I see something, oh yeah, let me talk about that. But I talk about it in a way that is natural and not exactly what I wrote down to prepare. Um, so yeah, I would say have an outline, run through it a few times, and by a few, it could be 5, it could be 10, it could be, if you're crazy like me, I do a million. Don't recommend that, but run through it so that when the time comes, in your mind you have kind of a storyboard and like a frame to follow, even if it's not word for word what you prepared. So I don't know if there's any others. Oh, thank you for sharing. Oh, thank you for watching. I don't think there's any more questions, but thank you guys so much for listening. It's been a crazy journey in my very short career, but I've been in a lot of industries. Happy always to do these kinds of things and give back because I've been in all of your shoes, and I'm still learning myself. I'm still battling with this imposter syndrome, especially now, like I said, it's my new role. So happy to connect with everyone. You guys can add me on LinkedIn. So if you just search my name, Masiel, one S, Torres. You can add me on Instagram, which is Masiel.Torres. Add me on Facebook, wherever you guys feel comfortable. And I'd love to, keep in touch with all of you. And I have a few mentees, so I'm very big on mentoring. If anyone wants any advice or just a chat, I'm happy to do that as well. So again, thank you to the Alumni Association for having me, and I hope to see you guys all on our social channels. So bye everyone.